Hi, I'm Claudia Black, and having been raised in a family affected by chemical dependency, and having been in the field of chemical dependency as a professional for over 20 years now, in many ways I do know what it's like to live with substance abuse. As I talk about having someone close to you who is experiencing addiction, I realize that that addicted person may be your parent, a mother or father, or a step-parent. It could be a sibling, your brother or sister. It might be your child, a teenage child, or an adult-age child. It could be your husband, your wife, your lover, your partner. It may be a member of the extended family or otherwise close friend. The drug abused could be alcohol, but just as possibly today it could be an addiction to prescription pills, marijuana, cocaine, crack cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, or any mind-changing chemical. But irrespective of the drug that's being predominantly abused, life for everybody in the family is impacted. Over the years, I have frequently worked with young people as well as adults, and sometimes it is easier for children to be more open and honest about what it is that's happening in a family. At various times in this presentation, I will show you a few pictures that children who live with addiction, have drawn for me. This picture was drawn by Jason. Jason is a real sweet 9-year-old child. He has dark hair and he has brown eyes, and he likes to take care of the other kids in group. And he's told me how much he takes care of his younger brother and sisters, particularly when his parents are out. As accommodating as Jason is at home, his picture reflects his awareness of the problem and the pain within the family. He says, alcohol and drugs are like dominoes. They knock down the person who knocks down everyone else, including themselves. While alcohol and drugs take an incredible toll on the abuser, they also take an incredible toll on the family. To live with addiction, that means that you probably have had a gamut of feelings that range from anger to rage to helplessness. After all, you have lived with Jekyll and Hyde personality changes, sneaky behavior, lying, broken promises, possibly even violence. Some of you have lived with great financial stress, and many of you are holding on to shameful family secrets. For many of you, it's become a way of life because addiction runs in the family. It's very common to discover that a chemically dependent person was raised in an addictive home. But oftentimes we find that husbands and wives, the significant others, also grew up with addiction. If you're a parent who has a child who is addicted, it sometimes gets really confusing when you may not be a substance abuser, but one of your parents was, to see addiction rear its ugly head in your family. It is not the least bit uncommon to see addiction skip a generation. Whatever your past experience has been, though, as family members today, you are most likely frustrated and possibly very angry. And yet, if you're viewing this video, it is likely that the addicted person is in some type of treatment, so your feelings may be mixed with a guarded sense of hope. Your very presence here is reason to be hopeful. You are a part of breaking the cycle of addiction. To live with addiction in the family typically means that you've lived for months and maybe even years with fear. If you're the parent of an addicted child, it's common to feel incredible guilt. As a family member, we have been hurt, we are lonely, and for some of us, we only know despair. Andrea's picture reflects that despair. Andrea's 11. Her mother's alcoholic. She's a serious young girl. She questions me a lot. She's not very trusting, but she does find it safe to draw pictures. And Andrea's picture will reflect the despair that I think so many family members feel. She says, love is caring enough to help, but sometimes it runs out, and there's no more love left in her bottle of love. The consequences. The consequences to living with addiction are many. Give yourself time to think about these questions. Do you feel numb, as if your feelings are frozen? Are you frightened of your feelings and the feelings of others? Do you tolerate inappropriate behavior, hurtful behavior? Do you have difficulty asking for help? It might not even dawn on you that you could use help. Do you have difficulty trusting others? Do you have difficulty trusting yourself? Do you find yourself taking care of everybody else's needs, forgetting about your own needs along the way? Are you rushing through life? Do you attempt to fill your fears and maybe your emptiness with alcohol, drugs, relationships, or work? The ultimate consequence, though, is that life becomes controlled by somebody else's addiction. Again, the ultimate consequence is that life becomes controlled by somebody else's addiction. One of the most important messages that you need to truly grasp is that you are powerless over anyone's addiction. Because without grasping that concept, you're going to stay controlled by the disease. I'd like to help you begin the process of family recovery by addressing the issues of powerlessness, unmanageability, and tough love. Now, we know that the bottom line of recovery for the chemically dependent person is their need to accept that they are genuinely powerless over the use of mind-changing chemicals. Recovery for the family begins with their acceptance that they are powerless over the alcoholic addict's use of alcohol and drugs. Now that means that you need to come to terms in your heart that no amount of controlling, begging, pleading, or manipulating will keep them clean and sober. To truly know in your heart and soul that their usage and their behavior is not about you, it is about them and their disease. Now, for some of you to think of yourself as powerless can feel like a slap in the face. And others of you have only felt powerless, overcome with helplessness for a very long time. Don't get confused about the language here. Powerlessness is not defeat. When I say that you need to recognize that you are powerless, I am not suggesting that you would jeopardize the financial, physical, or spiritual safety of the family. You may be powerless over the disease, but that doesn't mean that you allow the grocery money to be taken and used for drugs, or that you would tell lies for the addicted person, or that you sell the car to bail them out of jail, or that you sign for a home equity loan for them to be able to pay off their debts. In the past, you've attempted to control the addicted person's behavior and usage, and that has ended in failure. It may be easier to understand powerlessness by showing examples of some of the controlling behaviors that you may have used. Have you found yourself doing any of these? Using the silent treatment. Lying to your spouse, other children, the employer, friends, relatives about what it is that's occurring. Making threats from which you later back down. Adjusting, rearranging your schedule in some way to be able to control the dependent's use. Or canceling trips, vacations, holidays to care or to watch over the addicted person, or simply not to go places to be able to control or watch over the situation. Assuming responsibilities that are the responsibility of the addicted person. Hiding or dumping the alcohol or stash. Doing a geographic, forbidding contact with certain friends, and then when that doesn't work, often moving miles away to a different community in an attempt to separate the addict from friends. Lecturing, nagging, preaching, begging, bribing, accusing, whining. Avoiding uncomfortable issues. Doing what you need to do to not rock the boat. Pretending that there are no problems. A little girl one time said to me, "In our house, we pretend things are different than how they really are." My question is, in your house, do you pretend things are different than how they really are? Do you minimize? Do you discount? Do you rationalize? Please know that all of these behaviors are an absolutely natural response when you care about somebody who's addicted. Control is very often an attempt to bring order to chaos. I think it's an attempt to bring comfort to pain. But what I hope that you can see is that in spite of your best efforts, the situation just continues to worsen. In addition to recognizing and accepting powerlessness, we also need to own how addiction has made our lives unmanageable. In doing so, we are more apt to be willing to make the changes in our life that will ultimately bring us some kind of peace. Now, what I'm addressing is the first step of Al-Anon. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. Now, I think that word unmanageable is really hard to grasp, particularly when you may be the one person in the family who has worked so hard to keep everything in order. And yet there is a price that you are paying. Are you experiencing loss of sleep? Lying awake waiting for them to come home? Headaches, oftentimes stress-induced. Stomach problems, the stomach's in a constant knot. Weight change, it could be a gain, it may be a loss. Eating may be a source of comfort, or you might be eating in anger, or maybe you're not eating because of nervousness or anger. Anger. You know, you may have resorted to uncontrollable anger at times, or maybe even rage. Maybe you have said or done something that you absolutely cannot believe that you did. Silent rage. You know, that is the anger and the rage that is felt, but it's never spoken out loud. Excessive crying. Finding yourself crying frequently and not knowing why. Isolation. You're avoiding family, friends. The job is impacted. Your performance or your attendance is impaired. Martyrdom. Martyrdom is when you're willing to take the brunt of the shame and the repercussions for the addict's behavior. An inability to focus attention. Total preoccupation. So focused on what they're doing or not doing that you're not attending well to your own responsibilities. Destructive behavior. Going on a shopping spree that you can't afford. Having an affair. Physically abusing yourself or somebody else. Maybe destroying property. Abusing alcohol or drugs yourself. I'll show you how loaded I can get. You know, I don't need to be responsible either. Lastly, depression. The ongoing sense of helplessness, sorrow, and hopelessness. When addiction begins to pervade your life, your behavior can change so gradually that you may not even notice it. And pretty soon it's as if you're a whole different person than what you ever remember being. You feel, you think, and you act in ways that do not feel good. Now, remember that whatever your behavior, you don't need to beat yourself up about the past. Today, you have a fresh start. Here is an opportunity now to discuss ways that you've attempted to control, how that has not worked, and your areas of unmanageability. There's a prayer used by many people in recovery today called the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. By identifying where we have the power to effect change and where we do not, we will come to find our strength. While we are powerless over the disease, we are not powerless over our behavior. To no longer allow the disease to be the controlling factor of your life, it is absolutely vital that you practice what is called tough love. Now, tough love means we let go. We let go of any enabling behavior that makes it easier for them not to feel the consequences of their disease. Tough love means that you can no longer cover up for them. For example, they steal or break something and then you replace it, and then they're never held accountable or responsible. Tough love means you no longer lie. You stop telling lies for them. It means you no longer make excuses. You don't make excuses for them when they don't show up for work, or they don't have their schoolwork in, or they miss social obligations. Tough love means you don't loan money, irregardless of how important they say it is. Tough love means you don't bribe. You do not bribe them with money, with presents, such as, if you stay clean and sober or go to treatment, I'll buy you that car, or we'll go on that trip that you've always wanted to go on. Tough love means you do not clean up. You do not pick up their clothes. You don't clean up their messes. It means you don't maintain the don't talk rule. You don't remain silent when their behavior negatively affects you. You don't remain silent when they embarrass you, when they hurt you, or when they anger you. To make this point, this picture is done by Stephanie. Stephanie is 16 years of age. She's a junior in high school. Both of her parents are chemically dependent, drug addicts. And in her case, she lives with her grandparents. Now, she drew this picture showing how she saw enabling versus tough love. Enabling behavior is when you don't talk honestly. Tough love is saying what you see. Enabling behavior is not showing your feelings. Tough love is expressing how you feel. Enabling behavior is not asking questions. Tough love is asking those questions. Tough love, it means we allow them to experience the consequences of their behavior. Now, we call it tough love because it's difficult. It is difficult to see our person in pain, and they're going to be in pain when we don't soften their fall. They get confused, we feel guilty, sometimes we feel confused. But remember, when you attempt to shield them from their pain or to protect them from their own behavior, you are only protecting the addiction. Now, I realize how much easier it is for me to stand here and talk about this versus how difficult it is to put it into practice. But you do understand how necessary it is. Now, whether or not you have ever raised a child, you know that if you were to carry a toddler with you everywhere because you didn't want that young child to risk falling and being in pain, that child will never learn to walk. That child isn't going to learn the basics of needing to step a little higher, to go upstairs. It's important that you do not get in the way of what it is they need to learn. And as it applies to a small child, it also applies to the addicted person. At the sake of being redundant, by getting in the way of negative consequences, you're not helping the person that you love. You are only rescuing the addiction. Now is another opportunity for discussion, to identify ways that you have enabled and to dialogue about tough love behavior. Remember, you can love your addicted person, but you need to tough love them. That is, that you love them in your heart, but you stop any behaviors that make it easier for them not to feel the consequences of their addiction. As they say in Al-Anon, we release with love. I would like to show you one last picture drawn by the wife of an addict. She says, "I feel like I've been on a roller coaster for a real long time. I want off." Her picture reflects the turmoil of her life, a roller coaster that I'm sure many of you identify with. You can feel how tired she is on every level, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But her picture clearly indicates the beginning of recovery, the desire and the willingness in which to do it differently. Recovery for you is a way of regaining your own identity. It's moving out from the shadow of the chemically dependent person. You can begin to take responsibility for your own behavior and release yourself from the illusion that you've had control over the other person. Addiction is an absolutely devastating disease, and it's painful for everybody that's associated. Not only is living with addiction painful, but much about early recovery is painful. Saying the truth out loud, it hurts. You feel the sadness, the guilt, the shame, the anger. Changing your behavior in a manner that takes better care of you can be awkward and you're unsure of yourself. But the two biggest resistances to recovery are, first, yes, I want recovery, but I want it to be pain-free. And the second resistance, of course I want recovery, but I prefer to do it all by myself, thank you. When we're willing to meet the second resistance, when we're willing to allow other people to be a part of the process, they are the ones that will help us in walking through the pain. And it's only in walking through the pain that we come out the other side. For far too long, we've lived a life of isolation. The others that we allow to be a part of the process will shine the light and offer you the direction and the hope when it's hard for you to be able to see that for yourself. You deserve recovery for yourself. Thank you for being with me.